All right. Ay, yeah. Today we have a new guest. We have Nevin, and we have our typical host, Asif. Welcome today. We get to enjoy a unique perspective on AI and gain a lot of knowledge today and insight. So, Asif, the mic is yours. But today I'd like to introduce Nevin.
Oh, definitely. It's a pleasure to introduce Nevin. The depth of knowledge and depth of experience and depth of leadership that is the trias that we needed, right? The leadership to get things done, get things started. To have Nevin in this conversation discussing all these three topics, it's going to be fascinating. So, Nevin, welcome to AyAyAyAi.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
So, you know, we talk about AI in the sense that we understand AI from one perspective, and there's so many other perspectives, right? And when we bring those perspectives together, we communicate not over each other, but rather engage in a communication that comes into a fruition, as in we decide on taking an action, and then that action leads into a betterment of community, society, however you want to call it, just humanity in general. So managing that expectation of AI is something that we want to communicate very frequently and very well, because sometimes we get out of hand with fictional information, right? Information like, Will Smith and I Robots and Arnold Schwarzenegger with Skynet. We talk about it over and over. But there's Star Trek on top of that, right? Star Trek gives us those little thought that sparks in our head in childhood, and all of a sudden, next thing we know, as an adult, we're actually experiencing what we saw on Star Trek. Not all of it, but some of it, right? Some of the things from the Back to the Future movie has not really come to fruition. Like, we don't have fax machine in everybody's pocket. Somewhat of a fax machine, but not the fax machine that Back to the Future was talking about, right? So, Nevin, what's your thought on the current state of AI and where it has been? And are you thinking, like, where it is right now is where you thought it would be?
So let's talk about the historical nature of AI first and foremost. So, I mean, AI was coined back in the mid 50s, right? But that's not when it was created. It's been around for a long time before that. We just didn't know what to call it. And as you think about that, everybody's like, it's this futuristic technologies. I mean, growing up, we've all seen the show Star Trek. Who would have thought you had a little device on your shoulder that you communicate long distances with no limitations, like a radio that can monitor, your health, you're doing well, and all these things. But we have that. We call it a smartwatch. We just happen to wear it on our wrist instead of on our chest as a pin. And then you have the Lieutenant Uhura's walking around with a tablet. So let's put this into perspective. At the time Lieutenant Uhura was walking around with a tablet, it was a mini computer. You know, the computers of the time would take up the size of massive buildings and had to be rewired to be reprogrammed for every specific task. So the notion of she what she was had already existed, but they miniaturized it, right? To a degree that was incomprehensible at the time. It was thought futuristic, far fetched. But today, this tablet she used to carry around, we all have it. As a matter of fact, tablets, some would tell you they're kind of going out. Those were yesterday's news. You have them on your phone. My phone, I can open up into a tablet the size of, and then shut it. Have a phone, which can be a fax machine. It can monitor my health. It can do all of these things. And so the convenience of it all is astronomical, and what it can do inside of it, the capabilities it has are currently untapped. I mean, creative sensors inside of there to be put together to do some really unique things. So the things of the future, are here now. Like you said, the Will Smith movie where he walked around and all the billboards changed to the ads for specifically him. You know, I think we've all experienced that on the internet as we're going to certain sites to purchase things for our home, and then we go somewhere else and there's an ad in my email. on the same thing I was looking for over here. And some would say, well, it's just coincidence. Seems a little far-fetched to be considered coincidence. There's a linkage there, right? So and then we look in the future of what AI could do. You know, there's certain things that, like back to Star Trek. I'm not aware. Doesn't mean it's not there. It's just I'm not aware that there's a transporter that can transport humans from one place to another, right? Um, so biological material. But we can do things as like in a virtual environment. You know, we can have a virtual environment where I can enter that through AI in augmented reality. You can too, and we can work together to do things, whether it be in development or gaming or what have you, in a virtual environment. We can actually even create things in other environments that are replicated hundreds of miles away here through 3D printing, if you think about it, right? But we don't have a way to have this stop ceasing being here that I'm aware of, a living organism, and move it somewhere else. But not to say that we can't. So you have to question these things you see on sci-fi. Are these the creative art of the possible? I would say yes. Some of it's new, some of it's just improved, miniaturized, and then you have this, and then those things that people say, I think I can make that happen. That's that science of the possible, right? And I speak of this often. The creative part and the scientific part have to exist together in collaboration to come together to create this new world you speak of. So, is there limits to what it can do? I don't think so. I can't think of what they would be from what I've already seen in my lifetime. I mean, I can only imagine in the short time that I've lived, which for me has been a long time. Can you imagine what my kids are going to see and what their kids are going to see? I can't even comprehend it.
Yeah, I think there's
Yeah.
two sides of the conversations that you're engaging in right now. Like how you see in sci-fi that ability to imagine things comes from the fact that you already have a memory inside of your subconscious mind that's collecting those memories already. So five senses that we have, we've been collecting. I think the calculation goes something like 11 million bits per second
Yeah.
for a very, very long time. So however long you have lived, that's how many seconds of bits of data that you have collected in subconscious mind, and only used a fraction of it. I think the other calculation of that 11 million bits per second is that we only use 30 to 50 bits per second of those 11 million bits per second.
Right. So that's the
And
knowledge base. So we take data, we organize it, right, through its collection point, and call it a library, if you will. And so that it's structured in a way to make it accessible, right? And then that builds the knowledge base. And the data in the world doubles. They say every, I think it's 18 months or less now, if you can imagine that. That's a lot of data being collected. And the question is, how much of it is organized and structured? Very little. Just a fraction of it now. If we could organize and structure all that, then we take that knowledge that we have and we contextualize it. And once it's been contextualized, right, now we have understanding. It's these relational, of why, so what, why do we care? How these things fit together, what's the influence, what's the effect they have, and so we characterize that. So we go beyond the assessment of the data quality into characterizing it. Is what do those dependencies look like? And it's those dependencies that create a level of understanding. And we link that level of understanding to their evolution over time, their temporal mapping. Then we get what we call wisdom. And from that, we can get into genius because we can foresee the future. Churchill said it best: the further back you can look, the further forward you can see. We can foresee the future based on past performance or those frames of reference. But we can't do any of that until we've organized and structured the data, organize data into information and structure that information to a knowledge base that we can correlate or contextualize against. So once we've done that, the accelerated growth capable of that is just mind-boggling. And that's not a factor of how fast is the computer. People think, oh, if I had a faster computer, things would be better. The greatest impact we could make is organizing and structuring this disparate and disassociated, disaggregated data. Think about it like a library. If I had a library and I threw all the books in a pile and like in a warehouse and I'm searching for what I want, and once I find it and I read it, I throw it back in the pile. If it was at all organized when it came in the room, it's getting more and more disorganized every day. But thank goodness the library came up with this catalog system that that organizes and structures the book so I have access to them, in a way that's useful and helpful. And it also lets me know the more current book, so I could read the previous versions to the current version to see how it's evolving and growing and how societies think about it. Do yourself a favor, get yourself a dictionary from 1950, get one from 1970, get one from 1990, get one from today, and look up the same word.
Right.
It'll blow your mind. It's like, oh, it'll have the same definition. No, it will not. We have a living language, and it's continually growing and evolving.
So I think the word intelligent, right? Like I think the memory question, the structured memory. Farther you can look back, like Churchill would say, farther you can look back within your own memory will indicate how intelligent you are actually. Because the further you can recall your memory clearly and precisely without really losing a lot of the context behind it, it's sort of like an intelligent sign of like who you are as a person and how intelligent are you, right? So an AI that is just able to do tasks but has no memory or no imagination, like as in the creativity that humans have, we're going to start grading AIs off of this intelligence. And I think what's holding us back right now is us not to understand what it is that we want from AI, right? I think that's what's holding us back. Like, what do you think is holding us back at this point now that we know so much with the data, the amount of data that we're creating? Like, what's holding us back in just jumping in all in for this AI machine learning development so we can have an actual artificial general intelligence for next 10 years or so, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it seems like we're in a slow halt right now, as in like we're kind of in the cusp of making a decision, but we really haven't jumped in yet. Do you feel that same way?
Well, so let me describe it this way. So data feeds AI, and certain of the industry leaders will say AI stands for analytical information, which is a matter of organized data that's structured into information that makes it useful. But I guess one of the things we have to look at is when we say intelligence, how do we discern if somebody's intelligent? I have kids in college, right? And they're intelligent because they get A's, right? But how do they get the A's? Well, they're tested. Okay, but what is the testing for? Well, the teacher taught this, and this. So they're going to say, what are the three things I taught you? And if they can remember what they are, then they get an A and they're intelligent. But just because I can remember and recall, does that really make me intelligent? I mean, as we think through this, Einstein said it best. He said, if everybody takes thinking for granted, and if you really understand Einstein's teachings, which, most people say, oh, he's a physicist. Why does that relate to this conversation? Actually, no, he's a human behavioral scientist. He begins to understand thinking is something is something that you have to train yourself for, you teach yourself, you learn. And it's really important when you start dissecting what he's telling you. First of all, there's a training so you understand what everybody else knows. That's the knowledge base. And there's the teaching that helps you understand the influences from that knowledge base and how they impact and affect other things. So, and teaching and training are not interchangeable, right? Teaching is the Socratic method. I've been to a lot of universities, one of which was, Harvard, and they did a really great job because they ascribed the Socratic method. The Socratic method is not saying, this is your answer, go memorize it, it's going to be on the test. The Socratic method is asking the right questions to help you understand not just what the answer is or how it came to be, but why it is the way it is, which is an elevated level of understanding. That's why their graduates do so well. So when you talk about trying to apply knowledge without understanding, it's difficult. One of the things, Asif, we talked about one time was the historical understanding of AI. And I'll use an analogy, 2001: A Space Odyssey. I think everybody's probably seen the movie, right? And right. And then our biggest fear is HAL takes over and everything goes haywire. But HAL's not really taken over. HAL is given a specific set of instructions to carry out tasks in a predefined manner given predefined parameters. Okay. The problem here is you look at the movie carefully, you realize the reference points at some point in the journey are no longer existing. Right? It's kind of like going to the mall trying to find the shoe store. And you see all the shoe stores, but there's no you are here dot. So you don't know how to go from where you are to where you're trying to go. And everything goes haywire on you, right? And that's kind of what happens to HAL. The irony here, there's things about the movie nobody bothers to really dig in and try to understand. I do, you know. How did they come up with the name How is an interesting aside. Well, it's just a name. Don't make more out of it than it is. No, it's not just a name. It's one letter before another company's three-letter name. They made this AI system that beat a guy in chess called Watson. We all know them, right? So what's to come after How, HIABLM? I built a paper on that, thinking about that. To answer your question, what's the future look like? And after How, you don't have to just rely on pre-ascribe these parameters that if they change, you're out of luck because you lost your you are here dot in the mall. You have this judgment capability, right? Given
You no longer
know what to do, but how to do it. And then you have this cognitive capability, right? And the neural net to understand the interdependencies of when I do this, it affects other things and what that influence and effect looks like over time. So here, let me kind of put it together here. So you have the H, I, J, judgment, B, C, cognition, and then M, N, neural net. And now we have a human. Human has cognitive abilities. They have judgments based on their frames of reference. And I make decisions given my upbringing. One of the things we talked about before the podcast today was, you have the same situation, but you have different outcomes. The AI must be flawed. No, the AI is not flawed. It acts in accordance with its parameters, its predisposition, and all the things you feed it. For example, as a kid, I love dogs. It's just, just a big dog lover. I see a dog in the room, I run in, pet the dog, throw the ball, play fetch, have a great time with the dog. You might have gotten bitten by a dog when you're a kid. So you see a dog in the room, you're running out, I'm running in. Same dog, same room. Why the difference? Because there's a different frame of reference. So when we talk about teaching, because I really don't like the idea of training AI. We teach it. That's a different thing. And what's AI supposed to do for it? Well, MIT says it has an if then else, supposition in its programming language or its algorithm, and it's supposed to make decisions or come up with answers, right? And then they say, well, machine learning, what's that? Well, machine learning understands what those influence and how they affected things, which is two different things. Machine learning is trying to drive, how this came to be. AI is trying to say, what's the answer? And what I'm trying to get to is, and why is this important? And why is it responding the way it does? So we have Hal lost in the mall because he doesn't know the you're here dot, lost all reference point. Has just been, put a blindfold on, spin him around, now he's lost. And then we have Watson who can beat chess, but playing a game like Go is really tough. Right? Because you're not using probabilistic deterministics to figure the probability of success. But there's another algorithm that understands what your options and opportunities look like, which is what Go was written on. And now it knows how to win. And what it's literally doing is it's finding what are my options to continue to exist. It might not be my best answer, but it's the greatest option to continue the game. And if you take the probabilistic deterministics of its move, you'll probably find it's the lowest probability of winning, but it wins because it backs into success by understanding its circumstance, which is what I would suggest to us. We're always trying to find out, let's find the right answer. No, let's not try to find the right answer. Let's try to find the right question. And from that, it's more important to learn from my experiences than to always be right. So I don't have a problem being wrong because it's an opportunity to learn. I learn more from my mistakes and my successes. So we actually have the thought process. Places overseas, Oxford University is doing this now. There's a couple of other AI universities over there that were created that are starting to explore this, and the results are just amazing. And they're doing that through things like neural nets to understand what these relational dependencies look like. And when we start doing that, we get beyond just what's the right answer, but more importantly, what's the motive behind the action. In other words, we go from assessing the right answer to characterizing our circumstance. So to your question, once we are able to organize and structure data sufficiently, and we can start understanding, person with one watch knows what time it is, one person with two never quite sure, we can understand how it's evolving and what the sequence of events that created this situation, this circumstance. Now we understand all the dependencies that went into the decisions and all the background, the frame of reference that drove to our current understanding of our situation or situational awareness to understand what are those options? And from there, we can capitalize on opportunity. I wrote a paper on it called the ABCs of Intelligence, where it talks about AI comes up with great answers. Business intelligence comes up with great options. That's prescriptive modeling. And then cognitive intelligence, right, comes up with great opportunity, and goes from the planning to the programming piece to put it into action. And when you look at it in those three different buckets of, data feeds the A, drives the B to C, but more importantly, the loop. So one thing that I would encourage everybody to learn, most military people know this very well, especially Air Force guys, is John Boyd. He was a fighter pilot, and he knew he wasn't very good. I actually got to meet John early in my career. He was a great man, very humble, really, really had a lot of respect for me. So I'm not a very good pilot, and I know that, and I know I have a lot to learn. So I put myself in a learning environment. I call it the OODA loop. I observe my situation, accept it for what it is, you know, and then I orient to that situation given its current circumstances, right? What are the options? And then I make decisions based on available options, available information. Obviously, there's more, but I don't have time for that. And then I act not with the intent of being right, but intent from learning from that, which is the loop. So it's not a serial process. It's a circular process. And John's attitude was, these pilots make decisions better than mine by fivefold, every minute. But if I force myself to make a decision every 10 seconds, then I make 6 decisions a minute to their 1. And if I learn something from every decision, then I can outpace them. And he did. It's consistently. And that's the importance of learning, going into this with an effort to learn, not just an effort to, I have to be right. No, I'm okay being wrong because I'm going to learn from that. And I'm going to be better tomorrow than I was today. And I might not be the best today, but as long as I consistently learn, I will evolve. So to your point, to link it all back together, humans consistently start over every time they start something, with informed a little by their past actions, right? But computers don't. They pick off where they left off and said, okay, what happened the last time we tried this? Let's pick off from there and try the next iteration. And AI is not as smart as I would tell you. I don't think AI is as smart as people, but it's incredibly consistent. It's incredibly learning from past performance, which gives it an opportunity to come to a better end state long term than people do, who are always starting over from ground zero and trying to iterate that way.
Well, we have to stick to our CJL, like HAL from IBM, but we're sticking to CJL in order to remind ourselves that, we are human and there's a machine that will replicate us, behave like us, right? So we have to be really careful how we mirror ourselves into a machine because, it could be troublesome because if it starts acting like with our emotions, it could go sideways, go in wrong ways. I think Lucky has a good example of that from ChatGPT.
Well, I wanted to cover, you can cover that, but I mean, I'll be honest with you. I am just taken back by the wealth of information that Nevin has. There's so much, you give so much to cover and so much to talk about, but I'm just curious about your perspective. So a lot of different perspectives, and I'll paint the picture. Some are people from the school of thought that AI is something that augments humanity and will help humans make wiser, better decisions. And then there's a form of AI where we've gone down the road with movies and where we see AI as artificial intelligence. And there's something about becoming aware, where the algorithm starts to identify to be more human like and becomes aware. I don't think the line is necessarily there. I think we would like that line to be there because of all the movies we've seen with Skynet and, was it Short Circuit? That was one of my favorite movies growing up. Johnny Five making it through, getting struck by lightning, and all of a sudden he's alive. Johnny Five is alive. Well, what I see is AI, and you bring up a great point. I never thought about AI not being AI and being something else. What can it be? Is it really artificial intelligence, or is it actually the inputs or the information that we provide? And so is a phone a form of AI that improves us because now we can now get places faster, make better judgments because of the information we're getting? Or is AI, Johnny Five, and we're still way behind. And I can pretty much gauge where you're at, but I'm sure everyone else would like to hear your perspective.
Yeah, so let's start with the awareness piece. So when autonomous vehicles went out, yeah, I did a lot with autonomous vehicles early on, and I told people this is a driver assisted unit, and they said, well, when does it become AI? Once it's tested. Well, how do you know? I don't. That's why I'm going to go out and test it. If it works as I expect it to, and then it becomes AI. But if it doesn't, then I'm glad I said it's a driver assisted unit, because you didn't jump in the back seat, go to sleep, and wonder why you woke up in a crash.
Wait, what? We're not allowed to
They've
do
actually
that.
tried that.
But
I think they
We're not
I
allowed to
think
do
they
that.
died
Well,
doing that, right? There was an accident where people fell asleep in the back of their car as it was driving them, and they both died. There was a huge thing in
there's,
news with
yeah,
that
so
stuff.
there's,
here's the
so
question that you have to ask yourself. Was there a fault with the capability of the car? Well, I think most of us would say yes in some capacity. But what's the problem? So it drives to situational awareness. Okay, is my car safe? Yes, I've had the brakes checked. The engine runs great. Battery's fully charged. Got seat belts. I'm good to go. Is it safe for me to get to the store? No guarantees. Why is that? Because I'm not the only one on the road, and I don't know that the bridge didn't wash out, or it's about ready to fall, or lightning strikes, or a flood. I don't know. So to your point, to the second part of your question on awareness, you know, are these cars autonomous? And are they aware? At what level of awareness are we talking about? I mean, the day we have cars that say, I'm going to change lanes to the second lane. Why? Because there's a pothole in this lane. How do you know that? Well, because there's a car 3 lengths in front of me that tells me that. Oh, how does it know that? Because it hit the pothole. Well, but does it have a higher acuity of awareness than I do? Yes. To your phone, we started using on the phone, with directions. I can now choose to get somewhere by cost, distance, or time, whatever my priority is, right? If my priority is time, then I'm probably driving in a carpool lane. It's going to be expensive, but obviously that's not my priority. If distance is my priority, right, then it puts that first, and then of course and time. So and I could sequence the level of my priority, but the AI in the phone, through a multitude of other sensors, all other phones on the road, can indicate to me how fast they're moving, and it can discern what's the best path to meet my specific need or my specific priority, right? And so to answer your question, I would tell you yes, the capability exists, because a level of situational awareness informed by a multitude of sensors to the AI can make far better decisions on what route should I take home in order to meet my personal needs than I can, because I don't know what the freeways are. I don't know if there's a wreck on the 95 on the way home. I just don't know, right? And I don't know what the current cost of the carpool lane, because it changes where I'm at. So I mean, it might have been too expensive yesterday, but today, its cost is negligible and it's going to save me 2 hours. Why wouldn't I do that, right? But again, how do I know that? Well, because the AI can kind of sense all of these things from a multitude of sensors and inform me of that. So I would tell you AI has a level of awareness to the point. DARPA did an interesting experience that kind of proved that the capability has elevated awareness to a level of consciousness.
Look. I'm gonna ask this question and then I'm gonna process what you said, like, and as you're answering, because wow, like that's that's a great way to answer this questions that we've been asking ourselves. So like, there's different perspectives. Like I said in the beginning of the episode, it's why we're here. It's why we're in this podcast. So, but I got to ask you this question, because I've had it on back of my head for a while now. To think that when we live through time, right? And my favorite quote about time is that this has been the greatest time. This is the best of time. This is the worst of time, right? We have those paradoxes. It's okay. Paradox is what our brain is made out of, right? So as we live through time, we really don't realize the essence of the time that we're living through. Like, just like people that lived through, say, World War II or World War One, they saw time passing and they thought something of that time. Just like we are passing through time right now, we're looking at time. So did we? I mean, look, this is an entertainment question. Like, did we? do we have a breakthrough in AI already, or are we anticipating that breakthrough to happen? Because, like, what's your take on that? Because I always, you know, feel self-conflicted on this. I think we broke through AI a long time ago, right? When we talk about like encryption, right? That breakthrough happened with Alan Turing creating that encryption code so they can, you know, do the operation, I think called Stigma, right? Or um, I forgot the name of that operation where they broke the German codes. Enigma, excuse me. Enigma is
Yeah,
the name of
the
that
Enigma
operation.
machine. Yeah.
So you know that was like the breakthrough for AI for that time. Where I'm looking at this time in 2022, I feel frustrated that we're not as advanced as we should be, but I see huge potential coming down the pipe. So I say, you know, did we really have a breakthrough yet? Or do we already have the breakthrough? It's just that I'm self-deprecating myself from being happy about the amount of breakthroughs that we have. What's your thought on that? What's your take on that?
So the answer to both questions is yes. So have we had a breakthrough? Yeah, absolutely we have. I mean, let's just think for a moment. What are all the computations to land on the moon? I remember as a kid, I played this little game called Lunar Landing. And for the folks who are as old as I am, they know what I'm talking about. You fire the jet's rockets, and in the absence of space, the sooner you fire it, the better effect you have, the less fuel you have to use, and you don't want to run out. And so you've really got to plan ahead, right? Think about all the calculations we had to make early to understand the causality, the influence and effect, in order to drive the consequence of landing on the moon. And again, causality is a really important word I'd stress here. I can make a small decision today that has invest wisely and have a really great life tomorrow. Or I can just hold off, and then I've got to make an even better decision tomorrow to have the same great life, right? So you really have to have a lot of forethought. In order to have that, you have to understand the dependencies of things. So landing on the moon is the example I'll use to say that's just amazing to me that we were able to do that. Does that mean that our best years are behind us? No, because that kind of unleashed the creativity of everybody saying the impossible is only impossible until I make it possible. The I am on the impossible part. Right? That's what I like to look at it. And so we got a lot of people out there, willing to try. And because things can be done virtually, right? I don't have to put an airplane in a wind tunnel. I can put it in a digital wind tunnel. And if it fails, it's just programming. I didn't use any materials. I didn't use any time. If I have a catastrophic failure and it blew up, I didn't blow up a wind tunnel. The computer program stopped running. That didn't hurt anybody. So the risk levels are dropped exponentially. The time levels are compressed. The creativity is sparked. I mean, the things we're able to do today, it surpasses anything we could even comprehend in days gone past, which lets me think the things we'll be able to do in the future, it just continues to evolve. I mean, if you think about it, and it's just not faster computers, right? I grew up in the time where, every year there was a new processor because it was faster than last year's processor, and technology evolves every year and a half, as they say. Now there's a point of diminishing return. You can't be 50% faster. You can only be, 5-10% faster, and so forth. But the real thing that holds us back isn't, I would tell you, it's not the technology. We're only limited by our own creativity. If somebody hadn't thought about Lieutenant Uhura with her tablet, would we have tablets today? Is a question I ask. If somebody didn't think about Star Trek with their small communicator and always trying to miniaturize things, would we have even, if we didn't think it was possible, would we have even tried? When I work with innovation organizations, I say first you have to think, which is a process of trying to think of the art of the possible, creative process, right? And then you got to try. You have the courage to try. That's prototyping, expecting it'll probably fail, but I'm going to learn something from it. I'm not giving up. As I tell my kids, as long as you do two things in life, you don't make the same mistake twice expecting different results. Some people call it insanity. I just think that's probably a stupid thing to do, and you don't give up. Eventually you're going to figure it out, right? So that trying phase is critical. I mean, the testing, the thinking, the trying, and then when you have it, you're not done yet. You're not done. You got to test it. That's why the first driver autonomous vehicle was a driver assisted vehicle. We have to test it, make sure it performs as we expect. We're expecting it won't, or people are going to use things in a way that we never expected, right? Or there's a pothole in the road, or whatever. And in that process, then we eventually grow into a something, we build enough credibility to establish enough confidence that people are willing to sit back and let the car do the driving. And we have those now, right? It's getting the trust, and it takes time, but it starts with the spark of a creative idea, right, and the courage to try, So, to your point, I think our best years are, our golden years are behind us, but they were amazing years, and it built a strong foundation for the best years that lay ahead. As long as we're willing to, be creative and to have the courage to try, I think we'll do some amazing things. I'm hoping to live a long time just to see how it plays out, because I know it's going to be exciting.
I think we share that same ambition because I'm holding up this Bluetooth keyboard, and I'm hoping that in 5 years people will start making fun of me because I was one of those people that used those Bluetooth keyboard. Because we should be just able to speak to our laptop, and that laptop would not have all the hardware and the keyboards in front of it. It would be just an augmented reality laptop, just like one that's floating in the air and working just like a screen would, but there's no hardware logistics other than a projector. And I'm speaking into the projector, and the projector is doing what it is that I'm asking it to do, like Jarvis from Iron Man, right? Whatever is fictional, it is reality. And I would like to laugh at myself and say, like, I laughed at somebody for, I guess, for living in an age where they had to do certain things that I don't have to do, right? But then again, I laugh at myself because I used to dial into 56K dial-up modem using a phone line. And those are the experiences that we have to go through, because what we went through is what we cherish as a memory. But our imagination, when we engage that into a level that, say, instead of just recalling those memory, how can we use that memory using our imagination to leave a next generation with better than anything we could possibly fathom we could have, is a better way to live, because that gives us that humanity, that experience. That I mean, look, I'm not trying to judge myself against all the other animals and mammals, but that's what creates the humanity for what we are, right? As in, we have the memory, we have the imaginations, and that imagination, when we kick it up to a notch that no other mammal can match it, right? We leave it with the next generation that is able to look back at us and say, like, wow, look at that greatest generation that left us with so much that we benefit from today. Um, and we do it environmentally safely. We do it much better. We use less hardware. And that's the reason I bought up the hardware with the laptop, is that if you're projecting a screen onto a empty space where you're able to view just like a laptop without ever using a monitor, you are living without hardware, and you are doing a sustainable part of the environment where you no longer have to dig into the ground and the earth and check out the rare earth minerals and rare earth elements to create new hardwares and continuously develop this new hardware, and you're running out of the elements to build them with. So when we decrease the size of hardware and we increase the size of our imagination, we do a favor not to us but to the next generation, because they'll be able to live in a world where it's not full of smog.
Yeah.
I think we're experiencing smog in California and China, all over the world, but you don't want to live in a world where you cannot escape from smog and it's just full of smog, and you have to wear like some sort of air respirator to survive. That's that dystopian version of the movies that Harrison Ford made, right? So I just want to throw that out there because, like, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you that there's this time that's coming in front of us that is going to be much better than what we've experienced, and going away from the hardware, decreasing the size of hardware, the things that are, resource consuming, time consuming, and causes a whole lot of environmental challenges for us in the future, is something that we can definitely use our imagination for.
Yeah, let me comment to that real quick, Steve. So, to your keyboard example, there have been for an awful long time, probably 10 years or more, keyboards that are an optical sensor that is on the bot that plays out on your desktop. That is a picture of a keyboard, and you can type on that. And now the responsiveness, they've been working on that, but I mean, the capability exists. And yeah, I didn't have to use a lot of plastic and fill up a landfill of my keyboard. I didn't have to worry about pouring my coffee on it by mistake. I didn't have to worry about a lot of things, and it also projects on the wall the monitor. But let me give you an example of something that I think it was like 15 or more years ago, probably 20 years ago now. It was a video game, and it was a video game about somebody skiing down a hill. And you might ask yourself, what's the big deal about that? There was no joystick. There's a little device you stuck on your finger, and you controlled the skier going down the hill by that, and you didn't move your finger. It's like, how did that work? It worked on some neural network, some neural sensors in your finger, supposedly. And there's other devices that just has an optical that looks at your face and watches you, and you don't move, unlike a lot of video games today, and you're controlling the skier going down the hill. And it just, people just could not conceptualize that. Well, how did it do it? It watched your eyes. You will not go left unless you look there first, because you're not going to go left unless you make sure there's not a cliff there you're going to fall off of. It watched your eyes look left and right, and that's how it judged the direction of the skier going down the hill. It's really simple. Well, why doesn't it exist today? Because I watch people at a store with the demo of this thing. They put it on, it would work, and they throw it off their finger in fear. It's like, oh my God, it's reading my brain. It's putting thoughts in my head. No, it's just reading your neural net, your neural sensors, or it's looking at your eyes, just like I am. I'm not reading your thoughts.
Right.
So these things exist. The question, to your point on humanity, is when are we ready to accept them into our way of doing things? I mean, something so simple like your keyboard. You're probably aware of this, but the keyboard layout of the keys that you have today is not the original layout for the keyboard. They had to reconfigure the keyboard. And the reason for that is back in the day, the manual typewriters, you would type too fast and the keys would get jammed. They wouldn't fall down. So you reconfigure the keys to slow you down. So now we have digital keyboards. We went back to the old way, didn't we? No. Why not? I don't know.
He still got
look at the whole picture. Humanity precludes progress because we're not ready to accept it. I like to say often, you're wrong if you're right too soon. So sometimes you got to be patient enough for people to accept it.
Right. Wow. Lucky.
I remember I remember using a typewriter, and I don't care what you say, I would still they would still get stuck because I had the old black one.
Yeah.
Where they would come over, and they were kind of they had a shape to them, and as they would come across, they were rounded, and they'd get jammed up on each other. It didn't help me.
You must be a fast typer.
The only thing that did help me was my Commodore 64, though.
Right.
No problems there.
Yeah, but if you slowed down your typing, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
But you see my point? So we knew what the problem was, and rather than redesign the striking mechanism, we redesigned the keyboard. Okay. But when that's no longer an issue, why didn't we go back to the old design? Because people go with what they know. But what if I have a better option for them? They're probably not going to go for it. Why? Because they're comfortable with what they have. So the question is you'll see a lot of the technological transformations in history were out of necessity. In other words, something happened that we can't do it the way we've always done it, so now we have to figure a new way of doing it. We were forced to learn. We're forced to change and transform. So sometimes you have to ask yourself, did these changes occur because somebody found a better solution, or did the changes occur because the old solution was no longer available?
Well, there's an interesting case study. We can, we've all been digital immigrants, or, but we've seen how, and Asif, touched on it, where back in the day we used to all have an extra phone line at home just to connect to the internet, or a couple of extra lines because kids would be on chat lines. But we grew from having to dial into the internet to always having internet. And that you weren't really forced to do it. Technology rolled you into it. It was first cable modems, and then DSL came in, and those were typically business solutions, but then they made their way into the consumer side. And then consumers are like, well, why should I dial up? It's a problem. Most of the time you never got 56K. You never got 3300 baud. most of the time you were fluctuating and then it would drop. So what drove consumers was a better product. It's still, but there wasn't anything scary with AI though. And what I see that as a type of magic almost, where people see that as, how does AI do that? There's some magic, and they're not going to trust it. And you're right about that. It's innate in us. People are scared of seeing magic. You ever see David Blaine do a magic trick where frogs come out of his mouth, and all of a sudden everyone's running around scared? That it's going to seem like magic to many, and that's going to definitely deter most. It's going to be the have and the have-nots for a term until technology becomes accepted by all, for what depending on what type of technology. But it's not going to be an easy sell. I can guarantee you that. Bringing in something that just seems like magic.
Well, I mean, sometimes we go backwards. I remember growing up that there was pagers that you would say, "Hey, call me. I need to talk to you." And then they had these things. They had texting capability. You put limited text in the pager. You could actually text back and forth. And then they had this really amazing thing called a cell phone. I could actually call you and talk to you like we're doing here today. And then my kids, they don't use the phone portion of their phone. They just text me. And it's like, kids, it has a phone portion. You can call me. Oh no, Dad, I texted you. It's like, well, when did you tell me? Well, I texted it. Well, that's not talking to me. So one day I saw the kids in the living room years ago, and they're texting frivolously. I'm thinking to their friends, and then watching them, it's like, no, they're texting each other. I'm like, you're sitting right next to each other. So, I mean, there's a certain part of what we talk about here today, that goes to what we are ready for AI, what we're willing to allow AI to do for us, and are we comfortable with that? I mean, some people say, what's going to take over? Only if you let it. I am a strong believer of that, but again, you have to look at, the pros and cons, what it can do for you, what's the cost benefit analysis. And at the end of the day, is it helpful? I mean, you go on a cruise ship in this day and age, people say you don't get boarding passes anymore. You used to have these little token things that had a proximity sensor, and so they could keep track of where you're at in case there was an accident. They could save you for safety or for security or for getting on and off the boat. And people didn't know what that was. It's like, it's a proximity sensor in the little medallion they gave you. That's why you don't need a boarding pass. They don't even use those anymore. They're using facial recognition. Oh, that's this new AI. No, it's not. It's been around for 30, 40 years back. It was developed initially back in Vegas in the casinos to keep track of things, So, I mean, it's just not the technology, but the application of it is a good conversation to have, right? Sometimes it can really help society. Sometimes it can hurt society. Sometimes, it can create a good, secure environment, and sometimes it can create, a lack of privacy. And these are the conversations that obviously we're not going to get to here today. But these are the conversations that people are having, and I'm glad they're having, because with these new capabilities, come some decisions that need to be made. Is the car safe enough for me to go to this autonomous vehicle to go to the store? Well, how much history do you know about it? Not a lot. Probably, I think we need to get a little more information so we can build up, credibility of its capability and confidence in it, so we can trust it. Okay, good. But you don't just say no. You say no, not yet, and then you figure out, okay, where are you at with this? And you have that conversation. I mean, AI. Honestly, I don't think there's limits to what it can do, only by our own imagination and our own and what we're willing to accept. And if it does bad things, then maybe we should have not have accepted it. I mean, so we do need to look at that carefully. Of, is it serving society? It's really important that if we're going to introduce it and implement it, that it serves society and it serves it well. And that's an important conversation to have and a consideration to make.
Yeah, I think I advocate for two groups of people based on my affiliation, right? First one is for military veterans, right? And then I advocate for workforce. And I necessarily cannot say, oh, I advocate for this group of workforce, because humanity is workforce, right? So when we have to address and continue this conversation about how you could be so right that you're so wrong because the time wasn't right, yeah, like that happened a bunch of times in history. It will continuously happen repeatedly. Um, what I think from the workforce perspective, as in the workforce that is not engaged in this topic, in this effort, contributing with their feedback, contributing with their concerns, contributing with their perspective, right? So let's say, for example, uh, a workforce that is not included in the development, they will be left out to say, how do we replace that workforce so that AI can do the job? Now, the workforce that doesn't understand AI will have a different poisonous view against that AI. But that AI was built just the way AIs are built, which is to say, whatever data you feed me into is what I will execute, right? But when the workforce is engaged in feeding that data into AI, now you have a different sort of AI. That AI is to augment or assist the workforce, right? I mean, majority of the human beings that are experiencing 2022 is a workforce, right? That workforce that is able to say, like, I can do less, but actually I get more done because of something that's augmenting me. I'll accept that. But something that replaces me and leaves me at a disadvantage, I am not for it, right? So I think when I'm advocating for AI development, especially AI design, I think of it from the perspective that we need to engage more than what we can address in software development, more that we call for in software development. As in, when you develop software, coding and programming, it has actually limited implication, even though it's a wide implication, but it's limited implication. And I think, Nevin, me and you, we talked about safety, privacy, and security. We talked about human in the loop.
Right.
And so increasing that human in the loop to a level of not software, but beyond that, right? We need to educate more people as much as possible to get them to understand what are some of the implication and how to trust that AI, just to look that AI into the face, as in facial recognition, and to say, I know what that facial recognition is doing. As in, I understand what are the limitation on our capability with that facial recognition, because not all facial recognitions are the same. If it's overseas built by a communist party versus if it's built by somebody within states with the regulations that comes with the uh, uh, regulations that are coming out of Washington D.C. Right. So we have to understand these kind of complexity, and we have to teach that. We have to provide that knowledge to general population, so that way we are building trust, even though it's a slow trust, slow over time trust. We have to develop that through knowledge sharing, and this is what this podcast is about mainly, right? I can talk to you about machine learning and decision science and say the quadrants of true positive and false positive, and how data is able to identify itself, data that learns about itself. That'll be too technical. What we want to do is talk about the things that we've been talking about for the last hour or so. Is that these how do we build those trust, and what are some of the implications in having these trust versus not having this trust, right?
Yeah.
A workforce that is uh, taking care of its ability to develop this AI for itself will definitely benefit for next 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, however many years to come, because literally as an adult we are part of the workforce. There is no workforce to say like this workforce and that workforce. Everybody goes to work, even if you're a CEO, or even if you're some sort of say millionaire that got inherited some income, right? You still have to work towards that living, to eat your food, right? That's a work, to keep yourself fed, keep yourself clothed, and keep yourself like an adult in a member of society, right? It's a work. But when we talk about a workforce that is like, the general conventional workforce, which is that, you go for work for 8 hours a day and you do certain tasks and you get paid for it, that workforce really, really needs to be knowledgeable on these AI topics, right? Jumping into the cruise ship, I get it. You're going to see AI in so many places. But when it comes to your workplace, that's a different story. And you have to be involved in that workplace AI and have to understand and trust that AI, or at least feed that AI the right information, the right data, so that way it benefits you rather than it goes against you,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, to your
Um,
point though, you
covered.
said something about, it's back to the three T's I said. The workforce has to be, the people have to be involved, in thinking about, what I'm ready to accept with AI, you know, and being a part of trying it. Yes, did that meet my needs? And are there more benefits than negatives with it? And then the testing process, is it something that's consistent with performance? One of the mistakes a lot of people make with AI is says, okay, we got this AI that's going to do this. I say, good. So now I don't have to. Right. How consistent is it? What? Consistent. How consistent is it? How reliable is it? Well, it does it, but does it do it 100% of the time? Well, is that important? Yeah, it's really important, because here's the thing. If I'm expecting the AI to fill up my car with gas when it needs it, and I don't have to worry about it anymore, then I never bother to check the fuel gauge. But it only works 10% of the time. But now that I'm depending on it, it's left me stranded out in the middle of nowhere with no gas. That's a problem, right? And so we have to use it more AI in certain areas than others. For example, the cruise ship example. When you're on a cruise ship, it's a lovely experience if you haven't had a chance to do it, but it can be very dangerous. You're out in the middle of the ocean. You fall over the rail, go into sea at night, your chance of survival is pretty slim. You're in an unfamiliar area. There's a lot going on. And they're trying to give you this wonderful experience. So they're using AI to keep you safe. They're using AI to keep you secure. I mean, even with COVID right now, they used AI with a lot of the cruise ships with COVID to say, somebody came down to it, how many other passengers were contacted, and they use their AI in their security surveillance to determine, and they notify you, hey, you had contact with somebody. That's a real benefit. Did that, but there's a privacy concern in there too. So you got to look at this whole picture, and it's not an easy conversation to work through. You got to balance it out. So the other point is workforce. The big fear is AI is going to take my job. My attitude is I hope it does. Because here's the thing. When I first went into the workforce, I did this really low-level job, and then I mastered it, and I moved up. And as soon as I could get somebody else to take care of that job, and it became my goal in work is to work myself out of a job. Everybody else wants to keep a job. I'm trying to work my way out of it. And the quicker I can do that, the better I am, right? So I can create a self-synchronizing, self-sufficient environment that they don't need me anymore. Well, can you imagine who are they going to promote? The guy they don't know, or the guy who just made this whole operation autonomous? Well, they're going to promote him. So now I've moved up again. So AI can, if you do it right, can actually get the things about your job you don't like, the remedial tasks that nobody wants to do, which you have to do because it's part of the job. Turn that over to AI, elevate yourself, and then you get to be the decision maker. Not the same decision every day, but the the unusual decisions that the unforeseen circumstances, like Hal. He had to wake up Dave and say, "Hey, Dave, I don't really know what's going on here. I'm a little uncomfortable. I need a little bit of input here." And that's how that movie kind of evolved, right? So we're kind of back to where we started today, but that's how it worked. And then are you applying your AI like Watson, trying to understand what's your greatest probability to win? Are you trying to do your AI like Go, saying, how do I stay alive? Because evidently how you win the game is be last person standing. Or what DARPA did with Capture the Flag. There's some YouTube videos that are really fascinating, where they have these 5 independent computers that, once they started, they were disconnected from the net, power, they were all self-sufficient, and they started kind of doing this Capture the Flag game. And the one that won did something very interesting, unique, and innovative. I won't spoil it for you. You can watch the video. But that's why I say, a lot of people would say, oh my gosh, that wasn't part of the original training. No, it wasn't trained. It was taught. This is why teaching is so important. And we have to start trying to train things. We need to start teaching things so they understand what those dependencies are, so they can give us good advice. They can give us good options, so we can select the opportunity that meets our specific need rather than, look at that. So to your point, I'm looking forward to a future where AI has helped me be more aware, make better decisions, because I know all the past performance. I know all the current consequences as we understand them, and all the options, and how do I capitalize on those options to get the opportunities that best meet my need. I mean, my best choice might be, okay, we can do that, but it's going to take 5 years and $1 million. But we could do number 2 choice in 5 minutes for 50 cents. Which do you want? You can only have one today. Well, I'm going for that. Why? Because I get it now.
Right.
And the probability is, I don't know if I'm going to be, in 50 years, who knows what's going to happen. So, and it has the building blocks. So we need to start understanding that what can it do for us, and how can it do that in a way that helps me fulfill my personal goals and aspirations for my family and my future. and we all look at that, we're going to realize, I think we're going to realize we can be better with it than without it.
Uh, Good news, I think, that Lucky loves this generative AIs, and the Chat GPT is the ability to create so many more technology on top of Chat GPT, which, the text-based NLP-based AI that is taking the market by storm right now, is a good indicator of what's going to be built on top of these AIs, because these AIs, once they're able to communicate using text, they're able to execute and show us based on our but its ability to confirm with us that, hey, is this what you really want me to do? Do you really want me to create that video for you? The video of like 2 hour long movie that you want me to build. It's going to take up some process. This is how much is going to cost you, and I'm going to develop this movie in less than 30 days or 30 hours, however long the computational process takes, right? So these NLP capabilities that are coming into the market right now, the future is very bright, right? The use cases that are just going to stack up on top of these text-based document AI, NLP AIs, right? The ability for text to go text to speech, text to image, text to video. Possibilities are endless. Text to drive me to my next location. That's the text, that kind of AIs that we want, right? This Jarvis-like voice command that will be able to understand us with situational awareness, which I love that word because I learned it from you. Situational awareness, that it understands Asif, but it also understands Nevin for Nevin's purposes, right? So when Nevin speaks and says, "Take me to my favorite location," it knows where that favorite location is because it's been there before. And it's able to drive you there safely and keep you away from the other harmful drivers, by having those buffer zones that we as human drivers tend not to care that much about. But these AI drivers are actually taking care of us, right? They should be able to protect us. Um, with that, I just want to give a departing thought here, which is that decision making capability, right? There's these AIs. Ultimate visions that we have is to help us create and make better decisions, right? We have data driven decisions now. Next thing you know, that data driven decisions transforms into AI's decision, as in AI's ability to help us with make better decisions, as in every decisions you make, it helps you to make the next decision. So every time you have AI helping you with decisions, you're actually are much more informed. A full frame information that you're getting will help you to keep making more decisions better over time. So the next generations, the hope that I have is that they won't have to go through the bad decisions that I went through as a teenager. Because the thought process in my head had only me to solve the thought process in my head. Whereas in the next generation, they will have the thought process and they'll be able to articulate that thought process to an AI, and AI will be able to actually, come back with a response that will help them to create better decisions as the day goes by. And I'm not talking about a future here. This already exists in China, and Microsoft has built that AI, which has about 150 million subscribers communicating to that AI, for helpful information and decision making.
So,
So,
I'm going to see if I
decision making, I'm looking forward to as well,
yeah.
worldwide.
And let me just throw a thought at you as we close out. So currently, AI does help you make those decisions on what's the best decision, right? And it's doing better all the time. I see a day in the not too distant future where AI, once you've made your decision, it will help you understand how best to implement it. So you go from a tactical requirement, right, to an operational perspective. And I even see a day in the future that AI drives to your purpose, your strategic intent. In other words, at the end of the day, I don't use AI to order an Uber. I say, AI, I've had a long day at work. I just want to go home, watch a movie, and have dinner. And AI will figure out the best way to orchestrate that and make that happen for me. And I walk downstairs. He says, just go downstairs. I got you. There's a car, takes me home. A few minutes later, there's a pizza delivery guy. And then on my screen, all of a sudden the movie starts. And I didn't even know the movie, but it was better than I could have picked because it saw the other movies I watched, right? And made some really good recommendations based on my past movie watching experiences, right? So I think this can all come together. So to your first question, I always try to answer it and leave people with something to think about is, what is AI doing for you? How can it make your life better? And why is it important to elevate your quality of life, and drive not just to tactical and operational implications, but get to your strategic purpose. So you can have an improved quality of life. And I think it can help us with that. I don't think it's the end all be all answer for all things, but I think it can actually help benefit us all in some capacity.
That's awesome. Lucky?
Wow. Nevin, thank you for today, and thank you for your time and providing your unique and I look at as very engaging perspective. I'm going to steal from you now a little bit when it comes to AI, and you said it was analytical information or analytical inputs.
Analytical information, and I'm not the one that said that. There's some really top industry people that have always looked at it that way, and I think it's a good way to look at it to better understand what we're talking about.
I agree 1,000,000,000%. That just makes, to me, it drives the clarity from what it actually is to the fictitious thing that we've made it.
Yeah.
And so I want to thank you for today, and everyone listening. We truly enjoyed your perspective. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate the time.
And with that, we say AyAyAyAi.
AyAyAyAi.
Thank you, Nevin.
All right.
So much.